particularly as men, we need to understand that we're all struggling with stuff. And the more that we understand that, we get to share that and get it out there, and we don't hold the guilt and shame around that. We get to play with it and actually learn from those experiences rather than try to forget them, keep them in the shadow. And motherfucker, that's going to haunt you. I mean, I've lived it, trying to outrun that stuff. You just have to make peace with it and understand that in those moments, just like everybody, we're doing the best we can. We just, the shit tools weren't good, and we weren't in a good space.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Building Men Podcast. Become the strongest version of yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Anthony, what's up, my man? What's up, brother?
Hey.
I had this moment right now, Anthony. The audience knows as I was going through that, shit time in my life where I was homeless. I was waiting for the house to sell. I was going back and forth. It was just times were really tough for me I was going to be a single father of 3 kids, high school, middle school, elementary school. There was a lot of shit going on in my life. And at that time, there were a couple different people that I found that really spoke to me, that were on a specific trajectory in their life, a specific path in their life. And then something happened where it was either they went inside or something happened on the outside that forced this change to happen, that they changed the trajectory slightly in their life. And it made all the difference in the world. So the guest that we have on today was one of the people that I found, that I shared with you, that really made a huge impact on my life when I needed it to. And so I reached out to this gentleman September 13th of 2020. And so we started the podcast July 1st of 2020. So we were about 2 months in, and it was a train wreck still. Yeah. The podcast was still, it sounded, I go back and I listen every once in a while and I shake and shudder, I cringe. So this is me reaching out to him on September 13th of 2020. I said, "Hey, Cal, my name is Dennis. I'm a follower of the Great Unlearn and the host of the Building Men Podcast. I just started the podcast recently as I am in the process of rewriting my life. I spent 14 years as a school principal, mostly in middle school, and recently started down the left path, quote unquote, a term Boyd Vardy used on your podcast, and I absolutely loved. I'm reaching out because I believe in your message and I'm inspired by you." He gets back to me a day later and he says, "Congrats on starting the podcast, Dennis. It's quite an endeavor, and as simple as it is to start, it's really a ton of work to get it launched. Great to hear that men like yourself are choosing the left path, as this world is in desperate need of more awoken men. Keep it up, brother," with that emoji of like the hands praying together. And it meant such a great deal to me, and it made such an impact. One, that I reached out to this person who I was in awe of in the journey that he has been on. But the fact that he took the time to get back to me really said a lot about him and his character. So I wanted to turn it over, introduce the audience to Cal Callahan, the host of the Great Unlearn Podcast, and someone who I consider a mentor, and even though I just met him about 5 minutes ago. Welcome to the podcast, Cal.
Thanks, guys. And I appreciate you reading that. I think it's a great reminder to me that, when someone reaches out and they open their heart and they share something that is kind of dear to them, there's like a sacred space there that needs to be held. And I assumed that I had like a good response to you, because if you didn't, you're gonna maybe torpedo me. Right. I didn't anticipate that happening. So man, I think it's just important for us as we all go through this. We all navigate, and we're all in different places at different times, and the journey can be rough. And when we reach out for those that are helping us along the journey, just, like when I was starting out my podcast, there were guys like Aubrey and Kyle Kingsbury that were friends of mine, but I was looking to them and their podcast for a way that was different than I had known at that point in 47, 48 years. And I was starting to learn about it, but you need to like find those people and that message that resonates at a different level than what we were told, right? You've been in education, or you were in education for a long time. You understand that structure, and it's super challenging, as you found it, and you went off and started building men. And that was your answer to what the school system doesn't provide. It's never provided, and it's not the goal of the school system. And I rail on the school system on my podcast from time to time. It's not like a main thing I talk about. Whenever it comes up, I get a little bit triggered because I know the origins of it. It's not to create men. It's to create robots.
Yep.
And to keep you at a certain level, to get in to those menial jobs where there's no creativity, there's no room to really play, and there's no room to have your own experience. And it's been an eye-opener for me as our kids were going through that. And my wife, thankfully, was just recognizing that a couple of our kids, it just wasn't jiving with them. And for me, I understood that, but I didn't understand the context of it like I do now. And so with that, it just changed the way I've parented completely. And it's made it a lot easier. I'm not trying to control my kids. And I'm sure we'll get into this in the podcast, but it's one of the things I really love talking about is raising kids. Not that I haven't figured out, but I've done it many different ways. And where I'm at right now feels really good. And I recognize the connection that I have with my 3 kids. It's something I really, like, a few years ago, I didn't think was possible. I didn't know it was that was there for an opportunity. And so, with that, I say thank you guys. Thanks for having me on. I'm super stoked for this. It was great to connect and catch up right before we got on. It just felt like I was hanging out with my buddies, and not that we have a couple beers, but we could have a couple beers here and just shoot the shit. And I'm dude, stoked to be here, guys.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And it's interesting. One thing that really resonated with me immediately as I was listening to the Great Unlearn, one of the first episodes, was your level of authenticity, where you let people know exactly what it is that you did well, things that your mindset was in a certain way, that you just believed in this in such a strong way, and you were steadfast with it, and it continued. Conversely, you were very willing to say, this is where I was totally wrong. These were the spots in my life where I had it so off the charts, so wrong, and also being vulnerable enough to admit that shit. As men, it's really challenging to put it out there in this way. Like, I thought it was this way for such a long time, but guess what? I was wrong about it. And I'll reference one specific podcast. It was July 16th, 2020. The podcast was called Reserve the Right to Change, and it was one of your solo podcasts that you did. I re-listened to that one again. That was one of the first ones that I heard, and it was so interesting. You talked just about the idea of fun. You just mentioned fun again. As men, we're so driven, we're so focused. It's hard for us to take a step back, take a deep breath, and fucking play for a little bit. So you mentioned you were invited to Gretzky's son's camp as a coach, as a former ice hockey player. So talk to us a little bit about that episode, that Reserve the Right to Change, and then about that idea of men. We need to fucking settle down and be able to have fun and lean into that a little bit.
Yeah. I don't remember much about the particulars of that podcast, but I absolutely know what you're talking about, because I think I wrote about it in my newsletter as well, because it had such a profound effect on me. Wayne's a good friend of mine. His son Ty is a good friend of mine. And Ty was in Austin holding his hockey camp. And he's like, "Cal, just come out, play, get on, put the skates on, and we don't really have a role for you, so just go out there and do whatever you want." And so for an hour, I just went out there and I played, and I was on the ice again. It's been a while since I've been on the ice, and I felt so free out there. I wasn't thinking about anything but just having fun. And I was with these kids that were having their own experience, and I just felt this call to make their experience as fun as possible. And so my attention was really on them. But when I left, I just had this aha moment, like, fuck, that was so easy. I didn't have to do anything but show up as me. And I feel like that, man, like that moment really may have been the thing that has triggered where I've gone in the last year plus. And it's this idea you talk about of having fun and bringing it into all areas of my life. I've done, as a trader for almost 20 years in Chicago. We've been in Austin for 8 years. I've done a ton of personal investing. A lot of times, man, like I was doing because I didn't want to miss out on something. I didn't want to miss out on the next unicorn. I invested in so much stupid shit because I was afraid that I was going to miss this, big 20x opportunity. And as I started to really get clear on what was fun for me and the types of opportunities that were in the investment world that seemed fun and that I could evangelize, or I would evangelize to my friends if I had no money in it, because I just loved the product. I started to understand that I can marry these things. And then, controlling my calendar and like being really clear with my boundaries. Like, is this going to bring joy to me? Is this meeting, is this call, is this coffee going to bring, is it going to make me feel alive? And if it's no, like I started to say no. And that was like a new thing for me. I had leaky boundaries. I would say yes to a lot of things because I had free time. I wasn't working. And I had this like sense of guilt. And, as I got clear on those boundaries, I started to just advocate for myself. And I started to tune in. And this is a lot of the work I've done with Boyd Vardy, who's obviously been on my podcast a number of times and become a close friend. But it's like following those tracks, like what makes me feel open and expansive, do more of that. And what makes me feel constricted, fucking stop doing that stuff. And it's so simple. But when the boundaries aren't set, it's really hard to do that. For me, it was like guilt and, investing. And then I would invest in things because a friend was launching this thing and I didn't really believe in it, but I didn't know how to say no. I had the money, so I should do it. It's like, it was all the same story. When I got clear on that, everything changed for me. And it's funny, we were talking about before we got on just now that I celebrated my 50th birthday yesterday. And Boyd was kind of telling stories by the campfire at our house. And he offered for anyone to say anything to me about what I meant to them. And there was just a lot of, amazing things that I received that, it's the idea of like attending your funeral. I've never felt like that before. And it was the most special evening I probably ever had in my life. But one of the things that one of my buddies said was, you have this childlike playfulness about you, this curiosity, this wonder. And you seem to be able to hold space for a lot of different things because you're not dogmatic. And I was not that way for so much of my life. I thought it was right and wrong. I thought it was black and white. And as I came into this community in Austin, and guys like Aubrey and Kyle and others just loved me for who I was. And they were the ones that were holding space for me to be curious and what it would mean to be curious. And that just started me on this path of letting go of having to be right. And there's so many of us think we have to be right. I mean, again, the school system, you have to be right. There's not much nuance within that. And so for me, trying to, embody that and live that has really just opened up so many opportunities for me that it becomes about learning. So when we know the answer, I think you guys understand when we think we know the answer, the learning's done. We got to figure it out. Now I'm just going to defend this shit against what your point of view is. And we're going to, agree to disagree or just disagree. And that doesn't get anybody anywhere. And so I haven't perfected that by any means, but I'm much more open than I was. And I think just being in that space, you drop the shoulders, you can breathe, because how I feel about something doesn't reflect on, the type of person I am. And I'm not worried about what someone thinks about my opinion, about my experience. And so it just becomes this thing that continues to grow and grow and grow. And it makes life so much easier.
Yeah. As I listened to that episode, that was one thing that really stuck out to me. And I'm bringing it back to the experience where you're just in the moment, you're just there experiencing it, having a good time, out on the ice with friends, with kids, and just really leaning into that moment, not having to address a calendar, not having to feel like you need to look, sound, or feel a specific way. The other thing you mentioned there about education, I loved also what you said about just being able to ask questions. As educators, too many times we're giving answers and then we're giving praise. We're just saying, great job, that was awesome, love what you just did there. I often say to teachers, keep asking questions. If you want learning to happen, dig deeper into whatever it is. Let them really get deeper underneath those layers of what exists there. And it brings me back to your conversation about Boyd Vardy being, he speaks a lot about the path of not here. It's one of his main things, and that hit me hard as well. When you're going, he talks about tracking a lion in the Londolozi Reserve in South Africa. Hopefully I said that right, Londolozi.
You did. You nailed it.
So he speaks about, he's tracking a line in a specific area, and he gets to where he thinks it's going to be, and it's not there. And there's an initial reaction like, oh shit, I wasted all this time getting to the spot, and it's not where I thought it was going to be. And no, you learned lessons on this path. It's not the path that you've intended to go on, but it'll get you one step closer to the path that you will eventually be on in your life. So take us back a little bit. You mentioned you were a trader. You moved from Chicago. So you've had this path of not here experience in your life, and that path was one of the catalysts to create the idea of the Great Unlearn. So talk to us a little bit about that path of not here, and then what was it that you decided to create this movement called the Great Unlearn?
Yeah, great question, and I love that you bring this up, because my whole life, largely was the path of not here in many aspects. And for people, for them to maybe get a better understanding of it, we're going to do things that we quote unquote fuck up, and we'll look back at times in our life where we're not really proud of how we acted in a particular space and time, but that's information. Like, we know now, we have an experience. I talk about this, as all the time on the podcast. You need to have your own experience. Like, whatever we talk about today, if it sounds interesting, great, go have your own experience with it, and then that's the truth for you. And for me, I held a lot of shame about things in my past. And it wasn't until I understood that was all learning for me. It was like, oh, okay. So now I know that way is not the way for me. I've tried that. Let me try a different way. And like, when we can just accept like fucking everything, and I mean all of it, you can't leave anything out. We need to accept all of our past. And when we do that, we actually get to move forward much lighter, and with that curiosity. And, as you said, with the name of that, the title of that podcast was The Right to Change My Mind. And, I think that's something that enough of us don't give ourselves agency to. We need to be able to change our mind, because we have a different experience. New information comes in. We don't have to, hold true to this belief system that's been probably conditioned by society, schools, your loving parents, all that stuff, a lot of it well-intended, but it kind of fucks us up. And so the podcast became about sharing my journey and the journey of my guests, of what their unlearning has been. And, I don't bring on experts. I don't bring on people who won't open up the kimono and share their shit, because I think it's important for people to understand that we all have shit. I don't care how successful you may be in the kind of Western idea of success. We all have shit. And the more that we can share that, and I think particularly as men, we need to understand that we're all struggling with stuff. And the more that we understand that, we get to share that and get it out there, and we don't hold the guilt and shame around that. We get to play with it and actually learn from those experiences rather than try to forget them, keep them in the shadow. And motherfucker, that's going to haunt you. I mean, I've lived it, trying to outrun that stuff. You just have to make peace with it and understand that in those moments, just like everybody, we're doing the best we can. We just, the shit tools weren't good, and we weren't in a good space. And so the podcast has been an amazing opportunity for me, as I'm sure you guys understand. Like, it's about me to get in there and get super clear, because people are listening. So how do I really feel about this? You know, I try to not make flippant comments. I mean, sometimes I'll say shit because that's, my nature, but it's really, being a good listener, right? In this space, you have to be a really good listener to what's being discussed. And then when you do that, you just get to get into this vibe and then learn. It's like you're co-creating this space, and it's between us, but it's also for everyone else to be a part of. And it's been such a great, medium for me. And really I was always a pretty good listener. I become a really good listener because I see how important it is. And then when that carries over from the podcast to somebody, that comes to my house, or I see someone down at Sun Life Organics or wherever it may be, when someone's present with you, when they're not looking over your shoulder, they're not checking their phone, they're just there. And there's nothing, especially again, as men, to feel seen and heard. Man, that's when you start to have touches on that, it starts to change your orientation to how you want to be in the world. And you start to understand, for me, I've had a fair amount of financial success, and it's great, and I'm glad I've had it, but it's not the thing. For me, it's like connection. It's the 22, 23 guys that showed up last night to celebrate, my 50th. I can't even put it into words. It's, I did this meditation with a group of my brothers months ago. And the prompt was, imagine yourself near the end of your life. Like, where do you see, what's around you, and what's your vision? And I pictured myself sitting on a stump, surrounded by the people I love. And I experienced that last night. And it blew, in the moment, I was like, oh my God, this is what I want the end of my life to be. And here I was being able to receive all this love from some of the most amazing men I've ever met. And it just reminded me, you're I'm on the right path. Show up, be honest, be open, be vulnerable, be impeccable with your word, right? I love the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Do your best, be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally. And now I'm blanking on the other one because I'm a little rattled from last night. But
so I think it's do your best.
Yeah, so we have the opportunity to do this, but we need to start showing up for one another. And that's what helped me on this path. A lot of men showed up for me, and I've been showing up for a lot of men, and we show up for one another, and we're in service to the group. One of the things that Boyd talks about is we've been brought up in this comparative culture, but when we can shift that and we can see one another in relation to us. I can see me reflected in you reflected in me. And we start to see that, we start to have, Chase has some huge success. We all share in that. And then someone else has something really hard they're going through. We're there for that too. We get to be a part of this thing as one organism. And it just changes everything. You're just held in every moment. And we don't have to go it alone for so long. Talk about that old path. I just went alone. And sure, that creates resiliency and you can get shit done. And it is important to flex that muscle to be able to go there when you need to. But, I've been married 21 years. That's not great for a marriage. Like when I'm going through shit and I don't share it with my wife, and then I'm short and I'm closed, and she thinks it's because of her. And now I'm not communicating that there's some issue with her where it has nothing to do with her. I'm just holding all this stuff by myself. Is it because I feel shame? Because I can't handle it on my own? It's all the things. Because as I just start to be more vulnerable with my wife, with my partner, that just opens up this opportunity for us to connect on a different level. I become trustworthy because I share who I really am. I'm not putting up this facade like everything's great where I'm fucking dying inside. And so it all kind of comes together. And you listen to my podcast, you know that it's not super linear with my thought pattern. So I'm sure we'll go a few other areas, right, given the prompt. But
yeah, it's funny. As I'm sitting here listening, I almost forgot that I was interviewing you. I was just like, I'm sitting here with my brother listening to your podcast almost. Right, that was tremendous. It's funny you mentioned the opening up the kimono, like exposing what's underneath. I think that was one of your Halloween costumes one year, wasn't it? A kimono with nothing on underneath it, or that's going to be one soon. I'm sure that's coming down.
That's why I'm not allowed within 100 feet of a school. So,
so that struck me in a way. I remember there was a quote by he played for the Eagles. I'm a Giants fan. We're both Giants fans, suffering Giants fans, but played for the Eagles, and he was a coach of the Jets, Herm Edwards, and he had this quote. I listened to him on some sports show, and basically he said, "What is done in the darkness will eventually come to light." And I heard that at a time in my life where there were certain things, the way that I was living was not something that I was proud of. The way that I was showing up across the board in different ways, Cal was living the way that I thought other people wanted to see me. It was about the white picket fence. It was about, the way the outside looked at me. And so I wasn't even being authentic with myself. And the thing that I really missed in that part in my life was this brotherhood to keep me accountable. Like this group of men that I just, as I got engaged and then married and, was going through a dysfunctional marriage, I was pushing away men in my life because I felt like, if I'm going to be the best husband and father I can be, I need to be there and available and kind of at the beck and call of my ex-wife at the time. But what I was slowly doing was eroding my soul, and I didn't have that brotherhood feel anymore. I have my younger brother, but there were times where, I was, 35 years old and Anthony was 20 and 21 and he's in college, and I can't go to him with the same difficult shit that I would go to him right now with. So I guess I'm wondering when men start pushing away from that, brotherhood feel. And maybe it's just me, but my experience has been men get this career-oriented type thing, and then they settle down there in a family, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, friends go by the wayside. So as men, how do we keep that kind of flame burning inside of us, that we have that brotherhood that you experienced last night as you're sitting and this group of people around you telling you how they feel about you in front of you on your 50th birthday? How do we keep that fire burning?
Yeah, another great question. I think, oftentimes we do keep some sort of that brotherhood, but it's held together pretty weakly. It's around drinking, and it's not around the depth of what we're talking about, right? And that's fine. That's fine. But just know that that's not it. It's something that you can build upon because you do have a group of men. But you need to pay attention, who is ready to go deeper, who is ready to share their shit, who is ready to say, I'm fucking hurting right now. And it only takes one, you know. I was fortunate. I was a trader in Chicago. I had a group of men that I worked with, and I was fortunate enough to be hired by a guy who was such a tremendous father figure. He wasn't that much older than me, but he just, was such a man of integrity. And in that business, it's uncommon. So I was fortunate to land there. And that's what we cultivated, is a brotherhood. It's not that we didn't go out and drink. We did. And it's not that we're at the depth back then that we are today. But there was a common bond of, we got some shit going on, and we could share that without feeling like we had to put on a particular mask around that. So I think, to answer your question, just try it out on your friends. Like, see what they can hold and show up for them when they're having some difficulty. Don't give them advice. Just listen. Just fucking listen. I mean, I went through a lot of years of giving advice. It don't work. Same goes for your partner. Something I'm learning after 21 years. Shut the fuck up and just listen. And if she's coming to you with something that you did that, she's maybe misunderstanding your intentions or whatever, just say thank you. And I say this again, like, I'm just starting to do that because I always had a reason, and oftentimes it was a legit reason. It's like you didn't see it from the right perspective. Doesn't matter in that moment. She needs to be seen and heard. And by saying thank you, that gives me something to work with. I appreciate it. She doesn't care about the reasons why. She just wants to be seen and heard. And for you to take that and try to do it differently. And so the point in all of this is we need to do a much better job of just listening. And, it's hard sometimes when you think you're smart and you got the answer and you want to be like, I know how to figure this out. It just doesn't work. I spent, we mentioned Boyd a couple of times. He's spending a lot of time here in Austin. I see him almost every day. Fucking never gives me advice. Unless I say, dude, I need advice on this. Then he'll give me advice. Other than that, we talk about so much stuff, and we just hold space for one another. And we just play. And the more we just listen, the more someone holds that space for me, I eventually get to what I need by asking the questions, as you said.
Yep.
Can we ask good questions? But I think what is lacking, in our society, by and large, is this real brotherhood. And I'm very fortunate to be in a place like Austin where that is such a big part of the energy. That's what I love about my podcast is it shows, it's an opportunity to show people what's possible by just showing up for one another. And, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of work that really does go into it, because a lot of times we are afraid we're going to be judged when we start to share these things. But I would offer to anybody, if you're afraid of that, like, how tight are you with that other friend if they can't hold something that is really hurting you? Is that someone who's going to show up for you when the chips are down? I don't think so. So maybe it's a nice way to see, to kind of separate a little bit. It doesn't mean you just have to stop being friends with them, but you just understand where they're at. It's a bit of a litmus test for who's in your circle. And I think it's important over time to continue to tighten up that inner circle to get super clear. Cast that wide net. Like, be a cool guy. Like, be open. Like, figure it out. But the more time you spend with people, you start to recognize some patterns, and that's okay. That's where they're at. But it's important to spend more time with those ones that show up. And that's something I've been particularly keen to recently, is there's a small group of people that I hang out with. I have a really large group of friends, but we only have so much time. So I try to be really, diligent with how I spend that time. It's back to owning the calendar. Like, sure, I record the podcast and I have stuff with my kids and my wife, but I have a pretty fucking open schedule. And I really choose to keep it that way. And when I put something on there, I want to be super clear that I'm excited about what's happening there. I don't care about the outcome about what happens. I care about the energy of going into that space. And I think back to something that was talked about earlier, as men, we're so into this goal-oriented mindset, and it takes us away from these brotherhoods. It takes us away from just these amazing conversations that can happen when we don't give a shit about the outcome. I have guys that come over here on Wednesday. I have a group of 10 guys. Now it's 11 now. We work out, and then we come. I'm sitting in my kind of office space. We call it the Unlearn layer. But it's a vibe in here. So we work out, and whoever can stick around, we sit in here. We, smoke some, tobacco, tea, and herbs, and we just riff. And every now and then someone's working on something, and so we just co-create with them. And we're just supporting one another. But we don't do it because we want to launch a product or we want to do something. We do it because we really enjoy the space, and we never know what's going to happen in that space. But when you set the container properly with the right people, the magic just happens. So that's been like a big part of my learning lately.
Yep. And that, so much about it is about the journey, right? Like truly enjoying the process rather than just the goal at the end of it. And it's funny how much productivity and how much more comes out of it when you are in it just for the journey itself. You're there and present in the moment without expectations at all. You don't expect anything. You don't need anything at the end of this. You're just happy to be in that space. And I think as men, part of what we need to show up doing is creating a safe space for people to speak their truth, to talk to us. And usually what happens is when you create that space, people will solve things for themselves without us trying to fix them, without us trying to give them our advice. They will figure it out on their own by us asking the right questions, by us just being a soundboard for them to speak what they need to speak about. And one of my questions is, as you started to become get into your authentic self, starting to understand your vulnerabilities, more get into this play aspect of life rather than, living for other people or not having boundaries, did you notice that you started to become disconnected with certain people in your life? Like that people started to not vibe with you the same way because they knew you from what you were for the last 40 years, and that's who they were friendly with. And all of a sudden you opened up the floodgates of that's not me. Here's who I am. And you started saying no to things and opening up your eyes to new things. And did you start to notice that your group sort of diversified a little bit and some people went out and new people came in? How did that look for you?
Great. Yeah. You guys are hitting some great ones here. And I do, before I answer that question, you mentioned something, Anthony, at the beginning of that, that has been so central to what has allowed me to feel like this complete liberation in my life, not needing anything from anybody. If we can just enter relationship with the idea that I don't need anything from you, we're good, because then we just get to play. But if I need something from you, fucking angling, I'm working strategy, I'm trying to make this connection. And man, when I finally got into that space, I started to recognize the people that were wanting something from me and needing something from me. And it's like a fucking hard no. Yeah, I'd do it nicely, but I wouldn't spend time with them. And these people that I'm surrounded with right now, they don't need a goddamn thing from me. And because of that, all we do is give to one another. And it's not even a reciprocity thing. It's not like anyone's feels like they need to get somebody back for whatever it is. It's just the energy. It's this idea of abundance versus scarcity. And I know that like the shit gets thrown around a lot, but when you really step into abundance and when you bring that to a group, they start to feel that energy. And then it's like anything is possible. And no one is needing anything from anybody, but we're taught you got to network, you got to make connections, and there's like a fucking whole structure around that, and it's icky. And when it comes into your field, when you're clear on it, you just see it. You see it coming from a mile away. And thank God I finally see it now, because I was taken advantage of, and I'm a big boy. It's all good. And that's all they knew. So even the guys who are trying now, I have love for them. That's where they're at. I was there. You know, I think it's the most important thing I've learned is however someone's showing up, if you think they've like, fuck that guy, I was that guy at one point. So after the initial fuck that guy, I'm like, okay, this is where he's at right now. It's all good. I still have love. And to your question, Anthony, yeah, like I started to draw in a different set of friends, and my friends that I had, there was a little more distance because they didn't quite understand what I was going through. And frankly, I didn't articulate very well maybe what I was going through because I didn't even fucking know what I was going through. I was just curious, and I was ready to blow up my whole belief system to have my own experience to, you know, not really create a new one because I don't really want to be tied to a belief system, but I got to play in that. And, you know, what I found is so many of those men have come back into my life because I didn't want them to be on any other journey than the journey they're on. It didn't mean that I was trying to spend time with them when they were there. I wasn't drawn to it. I was drawn to the energy of the people that were filling my cup. And the other guys, like, again, I had love for them, but I wasn't choosing to spend time with them. And I think that's, for me, it worked really well because I didn't have to cut anybody off. And I'm fine to, you know, like, you know, put someone to the side and say, I'm pretty much done with him unless some shit changes. But generally, it's like, I'm just not vibing, so I'm just not going to hang out with them. And I think it's important for people to understand that you are going to draw in different people. And those people are going to help you on your journey, whatever journey you're on. So be very clear about where you want to be in this moment and who you want to surround yourself with, because whoever you surround yourself with is the journey you're going to go on. And it's okay. It's okay to let go of relationships. In fact, it's quite healthy because we all grow in different ways. It's you know, shit. I mean, I don't need to tell you that, you know, I mean, Dennis, you went through a divorce. You know, I've had troubles in my marriage, and sometimes you grow apart. Sometimes it wasn't the right fit. Sometimes, you know, in my case with my wife, there was a love for one another, and maybe we weren't in a great place individually, but we wanted to fight for that and work on ourselves to bring that version back to the relationship. But in a lot of cases, it's not that, and the relationship dissolves, and that's okay. Oftentimes, that's for the best. We don't have to hold on to this because marriage is whatever the fuck society tells us it is. You know, it's a whole construct that it can be really constricting for people. So I just offer to people, it's okay to distance yourself from people. You don't need to say, like, I'm not hanging out. Like, you don't have to be a dick about it, but own that calendar. Own that time of who you're spending, you know, those really quality, you know, moments with. And when you do that, and those people come in with the abundant mindset, and you have fun together, and there's no outcome, there's no strategies, none of that bullshit entangling it, it's life-changing. It becomes so fun. Life becomes so easy. Easy. Doesn't mean you don't have hard shit happen, you're better able to process it and work with it and see that, oh, okay, this is a learning opportunity. I don't fucking like it, but I know that at some point I'm going to be on the other side of this, and I'll see what the real wisdom is in it, but I just need to be in it right now.
It's three guys sitting around shooting the shit right now, and as you brought up your marriage, and I had mentioned that I had gone through a divorce. It wasn't something that I thought we were going to talk about today, but I'll go there. Is your marriage with Peyton, right? So you speak about it often on your podcast. When I first started the podcast, I was very hesitant to bring up situations from my past because it exposed me in a way that I didn't feel comfortable with. I felt that I would be viewed as a failure, that my kids might see me in a specific way. And listening to you on your podcast, you put it all out there on the table. You're like, this is the shit that how I felt. This is how she felt. This is what she said to me. Here's how I felt about it. So it's very exposing. Again, opening up the Kimura,
Kimono.
Yeah.
Kimura.
Yeah, don't throw me in a Kimura. Shit.
Yeah.
Dude, kimono. Open it.
Wearing your kimono, put them in a Kimura in your kimono.
All this is going. We're going in a deep direction here. So I'm going to put that as a title of the podcast. But to be able to do that and you open it up and expose people to this, one, how did you talk to Peyton about it beforehand? Did you say, listen, hon, like as I'm going through this, I'm going to put all this shit out on the table because your life is out there. Your relationship is there for public consumption. One, was that a conversation that happened? And then two, is it, does that often, after something comes up on the podcast, or you're laying in bed like, oh, I got to tell you, today I talked about this or that, and how does that whole dynamic work?
Yeah. I don't think we ever had any conversations around it. I think she understands, how I show up, and that was going to happen. And as you know, like I'm very careful to share anything that would be sensitive towards her. But for me, anything that's really dealing with me and how I feel and how I've, acted in a particular case, like I just need to get it out there. Because what happens, women listen to the podcast. And for me, it's like, look, I've done all these things and I was an asshole here, but this is what I was going through. So while it looked like I was being a dick to my wife, the root of that was I was feeling so shitty about who I was and like such a fraud and all that stuff that my actions, while they affected Peyton, and I'm not happy that it did, it wasn't about her. And so it starts to, for me, it's like an opportunity to give, women to see that their husbands, this is shit that men go through, whether they're really successful or whatever. Like, we have our shit, and this is what it looks like. This is what my shit looked like. This is where I'm at today. This is the shit I still work with today. I haven't fucking figured it all out, and I never will, but I'm on the journey to figuring it out. And it's like, almost in some ways, like, give them hope. Like, this can, your husband, like, just don't misunderstand maybe what he's going through. Maybe he's like me and wasn't very good at communicating when he was really struggling with something at work or with a friend or with how he was feeling about himself, and he directed it at you. And it's the more I get that out there, because as I said, guys like Aubrey and Kyle were doing that for me through the podcast. And then in our relationship here at Austin, I started to see how powerful that was for my own healing, to see these men who were successful in their own ways having all these flaws. It's like, yeah, I got all those fucking flaws too. And one of the beauties for me of having the podcast was I got to rewrite the story of how people saw me. A lot of people, like, I'm in really good shape and I have an awesome wife and kids, and if you looked at my Instagram, before I started the podcast, it's, like, pretty amazing some of the shit I was doing. But I got to tell people who I really was. And so they could take me down off that pedestal, because at that moment I didn't really know how to, to receive that. Now I know that that's their own thing. If they want to put me on a pedestal, that's work that they need to do. I don't deserve to be put on a pedestal. Nobody does. We're all in this human experience. We all have our shit. And for me, it was very cathartic to be able to tell like the full story. Like, I've got shit just like everybody else. My life's not perfect. I've got some shit that's going really well, but largely now it's because I'm having fun with life and trying to show others how to do that through my own example. But I think it's really important. For me, it's always been about giving other men permission to go there, to let them know that it's safe. And if it's not safe, again, as I said earlier, who are you surrounding yourself with? What's the worst that's going to happen? The best thing that can happen is you get super clear on who's really in your corner. Like, wouldn't that be great? When the fucking chips are down, you know who you can count on and you know who you can't count on. I mean, fuck. I mean, I've got that, in spades right now. And that feels really good because I've been super clear on who I am and what's important to me. And there's no masks anymore. This is fucking who I am. I'm done showing up at parties and trying to be a different guy to everybody I'm talking to. And fuck that. Like, I'm just fucking me. And if that's cool, then we'll have a great conversation. If it's not, then I'll fucking find someone else to talk to. Like, I'm good.
You mentioned your role model, your role as a role model for your kids, and what you want them to take out of this journey that you've gone on as well. When Building Men was started, what I tried to do, Cal, was break down what young men considered to be positive traits of masculinity. So what we did was we went on this journey and we talked about what are they hearing as elementary, middle school, maybe even to high school, about what does it mean to be a good man, a strong man. And at first it was around how good of an athlete you were. It was all about athletic success on the field, on the court, on the ice rink, whatever it was. So those kids were held in a higher regard than other kids. Then it became notches on your belt, how many girls you can bang. So it was about sexual prowess. That meant that you were a better man. And then it became monetary. It was more, how much wealth you can accumulate. It was about the stuff that you had, your financial success. Those three things is what a lot of young men base their masculinity on. And what we tried to do was help them understand those are things that can absolutely be taken away from you in your world. So you can lose all of those things. And if you're basing your masculinity on things that are extrinsic in nature, not something that comes from within, you're going down the wrong path, that path of not here. You need to take a step back and figure it out. So you have children. I know you have a son who's in high school, basketball player, definitely connected in that way. What are lessons that young men need right now? Then, if we're talking about building men, what are the lessons that they need? What do they need to come out of school, out of their journey in education, with these ideas around masculinity? What would you say if your son was asking you, Dad, what does it mean to be a man? I'm trying to learn this for myself. What's a couple things you might tell him?
Yeah. By the way, I love that you started that program. It's so lacking. And I love what you were able to discover in those ideas of masculinity, and that it is outside of you and they can be taken away. And so what do we hold within us, right? For me, these kids see me cry all the time, and it's generally out of gratitude. When I just feel so much love, I just get overwhelmed, and it's something I was never really in touch with. They need to know, I've had all those things you're talking about. I have them. And what they get to see is the men that I'm surrounding myself with. And they get to sit in here, in this room, when my buddies are over. They're always welcome. So my 15-year-old and my 18-year-old, my 14-year-old daughter, not interested in it, right? For probably obvious reasons. But they get to experience what it's like to be with men who love one another, who hug one another, who kiss each other on the cheek, who it's just they get to be in the energy. They get to ask questions. They get to give their opinion. And they start to understand that it's being in that vulnerable state. It's being able, for my kids, I let them know that I can handle anything they share with me. And now I have to act on that when they share something that's maybe challenging, right? My 15-year-old, super interested in psychedelics. He's listening to a bunch of Joe Rogan podcasts. He's listened to mine talking about it. Kyle is a close friend of his. And so he came to me and he wants to learn about it. I think the general response from most parents is like, you're too young. Like, no, you're not doing drugs, whatever the thing is. It comes out of fear, right? Well, my son wants to learn about this. So what an opportunity is for me to share a couple books that I think will help him, to give him some more podcasts, to have conversations with him, with other men in the room. He knows what I've done. I've talked about it. I don't hide it. I've told them everything I've done recently, in the past, with intention to just get fucked up. Like, they're gonna figure out their own experience. Can I help guide them in that? And so it just becomes opening up the boundaries for me with the kids and letting them play and know that, like, I do think he's too young for it. But I also want to hold his curiosity with a certain tenderness so that if he's ever in a situation, because I'm sure like you guys, I was doing stupid shit when my parents didn't want me to do. So he's going to probably find himself in a situation. I just want to be the first phone call, so that when something kind of goes a little amiss, I generally don't discipline them in a way that's super like penal. I just want them to know, like, nothing's unfixable. There are consequences for things, but I'm going to do it with an open heart. We're going to talk about it, but you kind of broke this rule, so we got to deal with it. It's like little things like that build trust, and our kids need to feel they can trust their parents. And when we lead with fear, there's no trust, because nobody reacts well when we're afraid. And when we can just take a deep breath, put ourselves in their shoes, and understand that they're reaching out, they're testing you. Can you hold this for me right now? How are you going to react? You flip out at a minor indiscretion, you're fucked. They're never going to come to you. They're going to go to their dumbass friends who have no idea what to do. And so it's been about, really just accepting them for who they are, to understand that I am just a part of their journey. I'm here to be an example, to live a life that is in integrity, and they'll take from that what they do. The words that come out of my mouth pale in comparison to how I live my life, and they're always paying attention. And so it's really important for me to be honest with them about all of it. And like I said, my main goal is to be their first phone call. Like, when the shit really hits the fan, I want them to know that I accept them for all of it. Like, I've fucked up plenty, haven't gotten caught, have got caught. Like, it's all part of their human experience. And for me to rob them of these experiences is to rob them of what is their unique experience. And so it's really important for me to see them as individual souls that are on their own journey, and to just try to help them along, guide them along a little bit, but allow them to spread their wings and fuck up. And like with school, like they're all at different places with it. And for me, I've always tried to be very clear. School's kind of a game. If you really like it, like I didn't mind it, I enjoyed it, I did well in it. I cheated here and there and did all that. So but I didn't mind going to school. If they want to go to college, like sure, you're going to need to do well in high school. But if you don't want to go to college, that's fine. I want you to figure out over the course of your life what it is you're drawn to doing. Whatever it is. My 15-year-old just took up BMXing. I'll pick him up at whatever time of night if he's down there practicing. Maybe he's smoking pot. I don't know. Like he's not going to do it there, and he's going to find a way to do it. You know, I don't want to start drug testing him. Like there's this whole like trust thing that's so important. And so it's my job, I feel, my role as, you know, their father, to just let them be who they're going to be and to be there for them, to support them on this journey.
And I believe that if when your kids are asking you a question about something, they are absolutely ready for the honest answer about whatever it is they're asking about. You know, kids in Jersey, they can't drive until they're 17. That would be like, you know, a 15-year-old saying, "Tell me about this car." No, I'm not telling you about this. You can't drive until you're 17 years old. That's illegal. If I tell you about it, you're going to steal a car and go on a fucking bender somewhere.
And then what do they do at that point?
Right,
like you're
exactly.
giving them that space to be heard, right? And I think that is the biggest thing as a child, is they want to be heard and trust, right? So they want to be able to trust the person that they're around. They want to be heard, and they want to be able, they observe, right? So allowing them that space to observe you and your natural being. And that's so powerful. That's so powerful, because now, again, you're going to be the person they go to. And when they go to you, you give them what they want to hear, because they'll get it in some way from somebody at some point, right? And I'm sure you'd rather that be you giving them that message.
Exactly, especially when it comes to something like psychedelics, which is, you know, a little trickier. You know, so it's like having those conversations and letting him know there's a few people in this community that I really trust with that information, and to say, listen, talk to so-and-so and talk to this person. They'll give you, you know, there's someone that I would do a medicine journey with. They will let you know in their vast experience what it looks like and the timing. And it's, so I just feel that I also don't have to give all the answers, right? Like last night, my two boys were out there around the campfire with, again, it was like 22, 23 other men. They got to hear what each of those men felt about me, what I've meant to them. I mean, they don't care about the money, you know? They're like, Dad's pretty dope. You know, like, why? Like, what is it? You know, so they start to see, you know, they're always paying attention, as I said, but, oh, actually there's something here versus being a dick. And yeah, I don't know, man. Like I've done all of it, you know, or most of it, I should say. And I've been the real oppressive dad who's trying to make his kids be the best they can be. And was that a struggle? I didn't like myself. I didn't have a good relationship with them. They weren't thriving. It was a complete shit show. But that's what we're taught. Keep your kids in line. Make sure they're minding their business. They're respectful. You know, and it's like, I've talked about this before on the podcast, but like the little things we do when our kids are young and, you know, someone's over, hey, go give so-and-so a hug. Your kid doesn't want to give them a hug. But you make them because it looks bad if they don't. Fucking do that. My kid wants to go up and give a hug or knucks or just say hi. This is their opportunity. They get to choose. But when we continually do that as parents because we're afraid of how it's going to look, we want our kids, you know, to be, you know, obedient. Our kid starts to overwrite that intuition of, I don't really feel the vibe. They fucking know. Boy, do they know. So we're overriding that and saying, no, don't trust what you feel. You're going to do this because it's the right thing to do. and it becomes a series of the right things to do, and you should, and a bunch of shoulds, and it's. But as dads and moms, we don't know any better. It's what we were taught. That's how we were brought up generally. Yep. It's like I'm trying to fucking change that narrative.
Cal, we definitely want to respect your time here, and I really feel like we've just barely scratched the surface with our conversation. We'd love to run this back with you again at some point in the future because there's so much here.
Anytime, guys.
So much
I
here.
love it. I love it all.
Cal, where could the Building Men audience find you? How can we get in touch with you?
Obviously, as you mentioned before, the Great Unlearn Podcast is a great place, and I do a little bit on Instagram, cal.callahan. Not a ton of content there. Maybe that'll change. It probably won't. I haven't really felt called to it, but the podcast stuff's usually up there, and I'm not coaching or running retreats or anything like that right now. I'm just having fun. So reach out to me, hit me up on Instagram, and I always respond. So I'd love to hear from everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Living testament that you definitely do respond. Brother, any final words?
Thank you, man. This was such a good conversation. I know we could probably keep talking for another 2 hours. And I think one thing that I'm gaining out of this is just, vulnerability is what draws people in, right? Where significance will push them away. So really people leaning into that, leaning into their flaws and opening up, because that's what's going to draw a bigger crowd into your corner. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that. And thanks again. And next time, let's schedule an hour and a half. We'll give us a little more time. Right?
Absolutely. So for the Building Men audience, you can find us building.men on Instagram, buildingmencoach@gmail.com. Our website is buildingmen.io. Cal Callahan, when I see you, I'm going to give you a kiss on the cheek. You're one of the dopest motherfuckers. I'll agree with your kids.
In your kimono.
Whatever I said.
Leave the kimonos back up in
yeah, we'll keep those in Jersey.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Go a step further than you thought you could go today. We'll see you next time on